The desert was silent except for the sound of wind moving across the sand. It was not an ordinary desert. The sand was red, fine like powder, and the dunes stretched so far that even machines lost their way. Long ago, this planet had been marked on maps as unimportant. Now explorers came back, hoping to find what had been left behind by the ones who lived here thousands of years ago. Myra stood on top of a dune, her scanner in her hand. The small device hummed, sending waves deep below the surface. Numbers appeared on the screen, showing shapes buried under the sand. Most were only broken stones or collapsed tunnels, but today the lines looked different. They formed a circle, thick and strong, almost like a sealed door hidden far underground. Myra felt her heart beat faster. She called out to her crew. "Captain, you should see this. There is something big here." Captain Rahul climbed the dune beside her. He was older, his face lined from years in the sun, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at the scanner, then down at the sand. "Could be nothing. Could be another broken wall. Are you sure it is worth the effort?" Myra nodded. "The signal is too strong. Look, the circle is complete. No cracks. Something is sealed down there." The other crew members gathered. There were 5 of them in total. They worked for a small survey company that sold maps and artifacts to museums. Most days were boring, filled with endless sand and weak signals. But this discovery made even the tired workers curious. They began to dig. Shovels cut into the red sand while small machines sucked the dust away. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, turning the dunes from gold to dark orange. At last, the top of a stone wall appeared. It was smooth, not broken like the ruins they had seen before. The team cleared more, and soon a massive door was uncovered. The door was not simple stone. Strange symbols were carved across its surface, glowing faintly even after so many years. The lines were sharp and beautiful, flowing like rivers of light. None of the crew could read them, but Myra felt drawn to the patterns. She placed her hand near one of the symbols, and the stone felt warm. "Don't touch it," Rahul warned. "We do not know what it is." Myra pulled her hand back, but her eyes stayed on the carvings. They seemed to call her, whispering of secrets hidden behind the door. Before the crew could continue, a group of locals appeared. They rode on small sand skimmers, their clothes wrapped tightly against the wind. One of them, an old guide who had helped the surveyors before, stepped forward. His voice was rough but clear. "You must leave this place," he said. "That door is not for you. It belongs to the one who must never be woken." Rahul frowned. "What do you mean? This is only a ruin. We explore ruins every week." The guide shook his head. "This is different. The stories say a queen was buried here. She ruled the stars with power no one could match. When her time ended, even her own people feared her return. They sealed her chamber with chains of stone and light. They said whoever broke the seal would pay with their soul." The other locals muttered in agreement. Some even turned their eyes away, refusing to look at the door. Myra listened carefully. The story made her skin prickle, but instead of fear she felt wonder. A queen buried here, forgotten by time. What knowledge could be hidden inside? What history lost? Rahul tried to reason with the guide. "We are not grave robbers. We only study. If this is true, then the world must know. You cannot expect us to leave history buried forever." But the old man only repeated his warning. "The chamber is not history. It is a prison. If you open it, you will regret it." With that, the locals left, their skimmers vanishing into the waves of sand. The crew stood in silence. The wind howled across the desert, covering their footprints. For a moment, some wondered if they should listen to the warning. But curiosity burned stronger. That night they set up camp near the uncovered door. Myra sat close to the fire, unable to take her eyes off the glowing carvings. She imagined the queen inside, resting in silence, her story untold. She felt as if the chamber itself wanted to be found, as if it had waited for someone like her. When the stars filled the sky, Myra took out her journal and wrote. She drew the symbols, recording every curve. She described the feeling of standing before the sealed chamber. She wrote about the guide's story, about the queen who had once ruled the stars. Sleep did not come easily. She dreamed of tall figures with crowns of light, walking across endless battlefields. She saw ships burning in space, worlds falling, and a throne made of stone. At the center of it all stood a queen with eyes like fire, her face both beautiful and terrible. She raised her hand, and the stars bent before her. Myra woke before dawn, her heart racing. She looked at the door once more, its carvings still glowing faintly. Something inside her whispered that this discovery was only the beginning. She did not know what waited beyond the seal, but she knew she could not turn away. When the sun rose, painting the desert in red and gold, Myra stood before her crew. Her voice was steady. We came here to find history, and we have found it. I don't care about the stories. We cannot leave this hidden. We must open it. Rahul looked at her for a long moment. Then he gave a small nod. Very well. We will prepare. But remember this, Myra. Once we open that door, there may be no turning back. The crew gathered their tools, machines humming to life. Sand was cleared, supports were built, and energy cutters were placed around the seal. The door stood silent, waiting, as if listening to their every move. As Myra watched the work begin, she felt both fear and excitement. She knew the chamber would not give up its secrets easily. But deep inside, she felt a strange certainty. She was meant to be here. She was meant to find the forgotten queen. And soon, the chamber would open. The second morning on the desert side began with heat and silence. The red sun rose fast, and the sand around the chamber shimmered like fire. Myra stood with her team, looking at the sealed door. It felt less like stone now and more like a living thing waiting to breathe again. The crew prepared carefully. They placed small machines along the edges of the door. These machines were made to cut through hard stone without breaking the structure. Rahul gave the order, and the cutters sparked to life, glowing white as they pressed against the surface. At first, nothing happened. The machines worked for minutes, but the door resisted. Then the symbols across the stone began to glow brighter, as if the chamber itself was aware of the attempt. The crew stepped back in surprise. The carvings pulsed with faint light, running in lines like rivers of energy. One of the crew, a young man named Bren, muttered nervously, "It is waking up." Maybe the guide was right. Rahul gave him a sharp look. "Stay focused. It is only old tech. We have seen things like this before." But Myra felt something deeper. The light was not only energy. It carried meaning. She stared at the carvings and felt her mind pull toward them, as though the symbols wanted her to understand. The lines curved and bent in ways that reminded her of star maps. She almost believed they told a story, though in a language older than memory. The machines cut again, and with a deep echo, the circle of the door trembled. Sand fell from above, and the ground shivered under their feet. Then, with a sound like stone grinding against stone, the door shifted. The crew froze as a crack appeared in the center. From the gap came a breath of cold air, heavy with age. It smelled of dust, metal, and something Myra could not name, a scent that made her skin prickle. The door slowly opened inward, revealing darkness beyond. Rahul lifted his light and stepped forward. The beam pierced the black, showing walls lined with carvings. Strange shapes filled the hall, images of tall figures wearing crowns and carrying weapons shaped like stars. Their eyes had been carved as shining stones that still glowed faintly. "This is no simple tomb," Rahul whispered. "It looks like a temple." The crew followed, lights flashing across the walls. The chamber was vast, the ceiling lost in shadows. As they moved deeper, the air grew colder, yet the walls seemed alive with faint light. Every step echoed as though 100 voices whispered far away. Myra walked at the front, her eyes drawn to every detail. She touched the walls gently, feeling the smooth stone under her fingers. The carvings showed the queen standing above crowds, ships rising behind her like wings. She was not shown as a prisoner but as a conqueror, powerful and endless. The deeper they went, the more the symbols glowed, as if guiding them. Finally, they reached the heart of the chamber. There, at the far end, stood a massive coffin-like structure. It was not simple stone. It shimmered faintly, covered in silver lines and strange crystal shapes. The air around it felt heavy, almost pressing against their chests. Bran whispered, "That is not a coffin. It looks alive." No one answered. The crew stood in silence, staring. Myra felt her breath catch. She stepped closer, her light falling across the strange structure. The lines carved into its surface were different from the others. They pulsed faintly, as though carrying energy from deep inside. She placed her hand near it but did not touch. The air around it was warm, like a soft fire. Rahul broke the silence. "Record everything. We need scans, drawings, every detail. This is more than a discovery. This is history itself." The crew spread out. Machines scanned the chamber, mapping the walls and capturing the carvings. But the silence was thick, and the sound of machines seemed too loud in such a place. Every so often, one of them would glance back at the coffin, uneasy. Myra stayed close to it, her eyes fixed. She whispered without thinking, "Who were you?" The carvings around the coffin gave some answers. They showed the queen surrounded by armies. One wall showed her raising her hands and ships bowing like loyal beasts. Another showed worlds burning as she stood in victory. Yet another showed her alone, standing before her own people, while they turned their faces away. Myra traced the final carving with her fingers. It showed the queen placed into the coffin by her own subjects. Chains of light wrapped around her, and her crown was set upon her chest. Above her, the same glowing symbols repeated one message again and again. Rahul came beside her, his face tight. "I do not like this." She was not buried as a hero. She was locked away. Myra nodded but did not move back. "Then why does it feel like she wants us to see her?" The door did not resist us. It opened. Bran muttered from the shadows, "Maybe it wanted new prisoners." The crew grew uneasy. Even the strongest among them felt the weight of the place. The silence was not empty. It was filled with waiting. Suddenly, the machines near the coffin began to fail. Their lights flickered and then shut down, one by one. The air thickened, and the faint glow on the coffin grew brighter. A deep hum filled the chamber, low and steady, like the beating of a giant heart. Rahul shouted, "Turn off the scanners. Step back. Do not touch anything." The crew obeyed, pulling away. But Myra could not move. The coffin's glow drew her closer. She felt her mind pulled into the symbols, as though they spoke directly to her. The hum grew louder, filling her chest, her bones, her thoughts. Then the glow faded as suddenly as it had come. The hum stopped. The chamber fell silent again. The crew stood frozen, their hearts racing. Rahul looked at each of them, his voice low but firm. "We do not open it. Not yet. We need to study this carefully. Whatever this place is, it is not safe." But Myra could not shake the feeling that the queen had seen them. Not only seen, but measured. The glow, the hum, the whispers in the silence, it all felt like a greeting. As they packed their tools and prepared to leave the chamber for the night, Myra stayed behind for a moment longer. She looked at the coffin, her hand resting against the air just above its surface. The cymbal seemed to pulse once more, faintly, like a heartbeat answering her. Myra whispered, "I will return." And as she turned to follow her crew, the chamber seemed to sigh, as though it had been waiting for that promise. The night after the discovery was restless for Myra. She lay in her tent, staring at the canvas roof, unable to close her eyes. The sound of the desert wind mixed with the steady echo of the chamber in her mind. She kept hearing the hum that had filled the room when the coffin glowed. It was not just a sound. It was like a voice trying to speak through the silence. When dawn broke, Myra left her tent early. The camp was quiet except for a few crew members preparing food. She walked back to the sealed chamber. The door now stood open, showing the dark hall within. She stood at the entrance, feeling the air flow past her, cold and strange. Rahul joined her soon after, his eyes heavy with lack of sleep. "You were thinking about it all night too, weren't you?" Myra nodded. "I felt like it was alive. Like it knew us." Rahul sighed. "That is what worries me." Later that morning, the crew gathered again inside the chamber. They carried stronger lights, heavier scanners, and protective suits. Rahul gave clear orders. "We do not touch the coffin. We only study. If anything happens, we leave immediately." The team spread out once more, scanning walls and floors, trying to learn how the chamber worked. But Myra stayed near the coffin, her eyes fixed on the glowing lines across its surface. She felt that something inside waited for her, not for machines or scanners, but for her alone. When no one was looking, she stepped closer. Her hand hovered above the coffin's surface. The air was warm, humming softly as if it recognized her. She hesitated, then let her fingers brush the cold crystal edge. At once the chamber shook. Lights blazed across the walls, running through the carvings in rivers of silver and blue. The air filled with a low thunder that made the floor tremble. The crew shouted, their voices lost under the echo. "Myra, step back!" Rahul cried. But it was too late. The coffin's glow expanded until the entire hall burned with white light. Myra shielded her eyes. A shape rose above the coffin, tall and shining. It was not flesh, not shadow, but something between. The figure formed slowly, like smoke given shape, until at last it stood clear. A queen of towering height, her form made of light and memory. A crown of fireless flame circled her head. Her eyes burned gold, and her voice came like a broken echo, half in her own tongue, half in words Myra could just barely understand. "You break the seal," the queen said. "You disturb the silence of chains. Who are you, little heir of fire?" The crew froze. Some dropped their tools. Bran whispered in fear, "She sees us. She sees all of us." Rahul stood firm, his voice steady though his hands shook. "We are explorers. We mean no harm. We only seek knowledge." The queen turned her glowing eyes to him, then back to Myra. "You woke me. The others are dust, but you carry the spark. The spark I once carried. Tell me, human child, do you come as savior or thief?" Myra's throat was dry, but she forced herself to speak. "I came to learn. To remember what was forgotten. I did not come for power." The queen tilted her head, studying her. "All who come for memory come for power, for memory is power. I was betrayed for this reason. Do you think yourself different?" Myra did not answer, for the chamber shook again. From the floor, stone and metal rose. Shapes formed into tall figures, guardians built of both machine and rock, their eyes glowing the same gold as the queen's. They held long weapons shaped like blades and staffs. The queen lifted her hand. "If you are worthy, you will stand against the judgment. If not, you will join the dust." The guardians stepped forward. Their movements were heavy but strong. The crew panicked. One raised his weapon, but Rahul shouted, "No shooting. Wait." See what they do. The first guardian swung its staff toward Myra. She leapt back, heart racing. Another moved toward Rahul, forcing him to stumble. It became clear the guardians were not killing them but testing them. Each strike pushed the crew to react, to dodge, to show courage. Myra realized this and shouted, "They want us to fight with heart, not to win with strength." She picked up a broken scanner rod from the ground and held it like a staff. When the next guardian struck, she blocked clumsily but stood firm. The force rattled her arms, but she did not fall. Rahul followed her lead, using a metal pipe to block another strike. Bran ducked and rolled, grabbing a rock to defend himself. Slowly, the crew learned to move together, covering each other, refusing to give in to fear. The Queen watched in silence, her golden eyes bright. Her voice filled the chamber again. Courage in the face of despair. Unity in the face of fear. Perhaps you are not as weak as I thought. The guardians pressed harder, but the crew held. Myra shouted commands, guiding them to work as one. When one fell back, another stepped forward. They did not defeat the guardians, but they endured. At last, the guardians paused, lowering their weapons. They bowed their stone heads, then sank back into the ground as if they had never existed. Silence filled the chamber again. The Queen looked at Myra, her voice softer now. You carry fire indeed. Not the fire that destroys, but the fire that endures. Few of my own ever carried it so purely. Perhaps I judged too quickly. Rahul stepped forward, breathing hard. What do you want from us? The Queen's golden eyes dimmed slightly. I want nothing. I wait. I was betrayed, locked away by those I ruled. They feared my return, so they built this prison. You have broken the silence. The chains grow weak. Soon I may walk again. Myra felt a chill. And if you do walk again, what will you do? The Queen's expression did not change, but her voice carried weight. That depends on you, little heir of fire. Will you set me free and share in the knowledge of the stars, or will you leave me here to dream alone until the end of time? Her words hung heavy in the chamber. The crew stood silent, their hearts pounding. The coffin still glowed behind her, cracked now with thin lines of light as though something inside pressed against its walls. The Queen's form flickered like a flame caught in the wind, but her eyes stayed on Myra. Myra felt her chest tighten. She did not know if the Queen was a ruler of wisdom or a conqueror of destruction. But she knew one thing: this was no longer a simple discovery. It was a choice that would change everything. The chamber felt heavier after the Queen's words. The glowing light of the coffin flickered, throwing long shadows across the walls. The crew stood close together, their eyes fixed on the tall figure of light. None of them spoke. It was as if the Queen's presence pressed down on their chests, making breath itself feel harder. The Queen raised her hand, and the symbols along the walls flared bright once more. Her golden eyes turned toward Myra. The first test was survival. You endured the strike of guardians and stood together. But endurance is not enough. You must show your heart, human child. You must walk the path of truth. Myra tightened her grip on the metal rod she still carried. She did not fully understand what the Queen meant, but she knew she could not turn away. Her crew looked to her now, waiting for her lead. Rahul gave her a single nod, silent but trusting. The floor beneath them shifted. The chamber seemed to breathe, and then the ground cracked open. The crew stumbled back as the stone floor folded into new shapes. A wide circle formed around Myra, smooth and shining. At the center rose a pillar of crystal glowing with soft blue light. The Queen's voice echoed through the hall. Step forward, Myra. This is your trial. Myra's chest tightened. She felt every eye on her, but she walked forward anyway. Her boots touched the smooth surface of the circle. At once, the air shimmered around her, and the sounds of her crew vanished. She turned, but they were gone, as if the chamber had swallowed them. Now she stood alone. A voice whispered all around her, not in the queen's broken language but in words she understood perfectly. It was the queen, but clearer, stronger. Tell me, child of fire. What is truth to you? The light around her shifted, showing shapes like dreams. She saw her past, herself as a young girl on Earth, reading old books of explorers who left their home world to find new ones. She remembered the feeling of wonder, the hunger to discover. She saw her family telling her she was chasing a life with no safety, no future. Yet she left anyway, joining the survey crews that mapped forgotten places. Truth, Myra said slowly, is not what is safe. Truth is what must be seen, even when others turn away. The whisper laughed softly, not cruel but testing. The light shifted again. Now she saw her crew, Rahul, Bran, and the others. They worked hard, but they were simple people. Some only cared about money. Others only wanted their contracts finished. Would they stay if the chamber turned against them? Would they run? The queen's voice asked, and what of loyalty? Do you trust these shadows you call friends? Myra looked at the images of her crew. They had followed her into the chamber, even when afraid. Rahul had stood firm, Bran had fought despite his fear. She knew they were not perfect, but they had not abandoned her. Yes, Myra said firmly. I trust them. They may doubt, but they stand. That is enough. The whispers paused. Then the light twisted once more. This time, Myra saw the queen herself. Tall, crowned, her eyes burning. But the image changed, showing the queen standing before her people, chains of light wrapping around her arms. Her own followers turned their faces away, leaving her to her prison. The queen's voice was sharper now. And what of me? Am I a monster, or am I a ruler betrayed? If you free me, do you free wisdom or doom? Myra's heart pounded. The air felt heavy, pressing against her lungs. She did not know the answer. The queen had been powerful, that much was clear from the carvings. She had led armies, burned worlds, bent stars to her will. Yet she had also been left to die by her own people. Was that justice, or was it fear? Finally, Myra spoke. I cannot know yet. But I know this: if your power is built on fear, then you will fall again. If it is built on truth, then maybe you deserve another chance. I do not fear you, but I will not follow blindly. The chamber shook. The pillar of crystal at the center blazed with light. Myra shielded her eyes. The whispers rose into a storm, then broke into silence. When the light faded, she was back in the chamber. Her crew stood around her, their faces pale, as if they too had seen something. Rahul stepped forward quickly. Myra, what happened? You were standing still, but the whole room was alive with light. Before she could answer, the queen spoke again, her voice echoing. The child has faced the path of truth. She has spoken with courage, though her words carry doubt. This is strength, for only the foolish are certain. The queen's golden eyes glowed brighter. The second trial is complete. The guardians rose again from the ground, but this time they did not lift their weapons. They bowed, stone faces lowered toward Myra and her crew. Rahul looked uneasy. I do not like this. She tests us, but for what? To serve her? To free her? Myra kept her eyes on the queen. She is measuring us. She wants to see if humans are like her people, or different. The queen's form flickered, her voice now carrying a softer tone. I ruled with fire. I was betrayed with fear. Perhaps you are not the same. But the chains that bind me are not yet broken. One trial remains before the seal is undone. The crew exchanged worried glances. Bran whispered, one more trial? What if that is the one that unleashes her completely? Rahul placed a hand on Myra's shoulder. We can leave now. We have proof. We have recordings. We do not need to risk more. But Myra's eyes stayed on the queen. She felt the weight of choice pressing harder with every breath. Something inside her whispered that the final trial would not test strength or truth alone. It would test the future itself. The queen lowered her hand. The glowing lines on the coffin dimmed slightly, though cracks of light still pulsed beneath the surface. She looked at Myra as if peering into her very soul. "Decide, child of fire," she said. "Will you face the last trial, or will you leave me to dream forever? The choice is yours, but once made, it cannot be undone." The chamber grew silent again. The crew waited for Myra's answer. The queen's golden eyes never wavered. And Myra knew the time of decision was drawing near. The chamber was quiet after the second trial, but the silence did not bring peace. The crew stood together, uneasy and restless, while Myra stared at the glowing figure of the queen. She felt the weight of the queen's eyes on her, golden and unblinking. At last, the queen spoke. "You wish to know who I was. You cannot choose without truth. So I will give you a piece of my story." The glow from the coffin spread across the walls. The carvings that had once been silent now shimmered, and images came alive. They moved like shadows of light, forming scenes across the stone. The first showed the queen standing tall among her people. Her crown shone like a star, and armies stretched out before her, countless and loyal. Ships rose behind her, vast fleets ready to travel across the galaxy. "I was born to lead," the queen said, her voice heavy with memory. "My people gave me their trust. I carried them beyond the stars. We built worlds where there had been nothing. We turned barren lands into shining cities. We thought ourselves eternal." The carvings shifted. Now they showed battles across the stars. Ships collided, fire streaked across skies, and whole worlds burned. The queen raised her hand, and her fleets followed without question. "But the galaxy is not empty," she continued. "Others challenged us. We crushed them. I showed no mercy, for mercy leaves weakness, and weakness invites death. Victory was our shield, and I held it high." Raoul muttered under his breath, "She was a conqueror." The queen's golden eyes turned briefly toward him. "Yes. I was conqueror, protector, ruler. But with every world we took, the fire burned hotter. My people began to fear the very strength that kept them alive." The carvings changed again. This time the queen stood alone on a high throne. Her armies bowed below her, but their heads were low, their faces hidden in shadow. Behind them, whispers of rebellion stirred. "They called me unending, unstoppable. They told each other that no one should hold such power, not even their queen. Yet they still followed, still obeyed, still hid their fear in silence. Until the silence became betrayal. The images grew darker. Chains of light wrapped around the queen. Her crown was taken from her head and set upon her chest. Her own people placed her in the coffin, surrounding it with stone and symbols of warning. "They came to me with false tears," the queen said. Her voice shook, not with weakness but with the weight of memory. "They said it was honor, a burial for the one who had given them everything. But I knew the truth. They wanted me locked away. They feared that if I lived, my shadow would rule even after I fell." The last image showed the coffin sealed, the glowing symbols burning bright as the chamber closed around her. The light faded, and the carvings grew still once more. The crew stood in silence. No one spoke for several breaths. The queen's story had filled the air like a storm. Bren was the first to break the silence. She admits it herself. She was ruthless. She burned worlds. Maybe they were right to seal her. The queen turned her gaze to him. "And yet you stand on a world my people once built. Even your kind would not survive without conquest. You take land, you claim stars, you fight to rise. Are you so different from me?" Bran swallowed hard and looked away. Myra stepped closer, her heart pounding. You say they betrayed you, but can you not see why they did it? You gave them worlds, yes, but at what cost? Were they free, or were they only shadows beneath your fire? For a moment the queen was silent. Her glowing form flickered, almost as if the memory itself wounded her. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. You think me blind to what I became? No, I saw their fear. I knew it, even as I told myself it was weakness. But the fire in me would not rest. I thought if I stopped, all would fall. And perhaps it would have. Yet they chose another path. They chose silence. Chains. Betrayal. Rahul stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. So you were both ruler and prisoner of your own fire. You gave them greatness, but you could not give them peace. The queen's eyes dimmed slightly. Yes. That is truth. Myra's thoughts turned heavy. The queen was not only a monster, nor only a victim. She was both. She had built and destroyed, protected and crushed. She was a ruler of strength, but also one trapped by it. The queen's gaze returned to Myra. Now you see the shadow of my story? You know what I was, what I became. Tell me, child of fire, what will you do with this truth? Myra hesitated. The choice pressed against her chest. The queen's power was clear, her knowledge vast. But so was the danger. If freed, would she rise as a protector of humanity or as its conqueror? Before she could answer, Rahul placed a hand on her shoulder. Myra, remember this. History is not only glory. It is warning. If you choose for all of us, you must know the risk. The queen's golden form flickered again, as though her strength was tied to Myra's decision. Her voice filled the chamber once more. I do not ask for blind faith. I ask for a chance. I can give you the knowledge of stars beyond your dreams. I can give your people weapons to guard against the darkness that waits beyond your world. Or, if you leave me here, I will dream forever in silence. Her words rang with both promise and threat. Myra looked around at her crew. Some faces held fear, others hope. Bran wanted to flee, Rahul wanted caution, the others seemed torn. But all of them looked to her for the final word. She turned back to the queen, her voice steady though her heart trembled. I have heard your story. I believe it is true. But truth is not enough. What you ask is more than knowledge, more than freedom. It is trust. And trust is not given, it must be earned. The queen's eyes blazed, but not in anger. In something closer to sorrow. Then let us see if trust can be born from chains. The chamber rumbled, the coffin glowing brighter, the cracks spreading across its surface. A pulse of energy ran through the floor, shaking the sand above. The queen's voice grew strong again. The last trial comes. Only then will chains break, or chains remain. Myra stood tall, her fists clenched. She knew the final test was near. And whatever choice she made, it would not only shape the queen's fate, it would shape the fate of humanity itself. The chamber shook as if the buried world itself had awakened. Dust fell from the ceiling, the floor trembled, and the coffin glowed with a blinding light. Myra stood in front of it, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She had listened to the queen's story, but now the final test had come. The queen's voice filled the chamber. This is the last trial. No carving, no illusion. This is truth. Choose, and your choice will bind more than yourself. It will bind your kind. The coffin cracked, and a surge of golden light spilled out, filling the room. The crew shielded their eyes, but Myra did not move. She forced herself to look into the glow, even though it hurt. Out of the light, two paths appeared. They were not real, but visions carved into the air. One showed the queen free, standing tall, a crown shining upon her head. Behind her were cities of light, fleets rising into the stars, and human banners flying high beside alien ones. It was a vision of power and triumph. The other path showed the coffin sealed once more, deeper and darker than before. The queen's glow dimmed, and silence returned. Humanity's path in that vision was slower, harder, filled with struggle. But there was no shadow above them, no queen watching from her throne. The queen's voice carried like thunder. One path brings greatness at my side. The other brings freedom without me. Both will shape your people for ages to come. Which will you choose? The crew stared at Myra, waiting. None spoke, for they knew the decision was not theirs. Raoul stepped forward carefully, his voice calm but firm. Myra, remember what she said. She built worlds, yes. But she also burned them. If you free her, we gain strength, but we also risk chains. Bran shook his head. And if we leave her sealed, we turn our backs on a chance no other human will ever see. Do you know how many lives her knowledge could save? Think of the diseases, the hunger, the wars. She could end them all. The others whispered to one another, torn between fear and hope. The chamber's light made their faces pale, their eyes wide. Myra felt the weight pressing on her chest. She knew this was not just a choice for her crew. The queen's words were true, it was a choice for humanity itself. If she freed the queen, Earth might rise higher than any dream. But if she made the wrong choice, humanity might not rise at all. The queen's golden figure leaned closer, her voice softer now, almost pleading. Child of fire, do not fear me. I was broken, yes, but I have learned in my silence. I know now that conquest alone cannot last. I can guide you without chains. I can teach without rule. Trust me, and I will serve, not command. Myra searched the queen's face. For the first time, she saw not only power but something that looked like sorrow. And yet, deep in the queen's eyes, the fire still burned. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The chamber's rumble faded in her mind, and all she could hear was her own heartbeat. Her thoughts swirled. If she freed the queen and was wrong, she might doom humanity. If she sealed the queen again, she might throw away a chance that would never return. Her hand trembled, but then she remembered Raul's words. History is not only glory. It is warning. She opened her eyes and spoke. If you truly wish for trust, then it must begin with proof. Words are not enough. I cannot free you only for promises. Trust must be earned. The queen's form flickered. And how will I earn it, if I am left in chains forever? Myra stood tall, her voice clear. I will not free you. Not yet. But I will not leave you to silence either. Your story, your knowledge, these can be remembered without setting you loose. We will take it back, share it, and learn from it. That is how you begin to earn trust. The chamber went still. The glowing visions trembled, as if the world itself hesitated at her words. The queen's golden eyes narrowed, not in anger but in thought. At last, she spoke slowly. You refuse both paths. You make a third. Few would dare such a choice. The coffin's cracks glowed brighter, then slowly sealed themselves again, not fully closed, but not fully open either. The glow dimmed to a steady pulse, like the heartbeat of something alive but resting. You bind me in patience, the queen said. Not silence, not freedom, but waiting. You will take my story to your people, and in that story, I will live. And perhaps, one day, they will choose again. Her figure began to fade, her voice echoing softly. You are braver than the ones who buried me. Braver than the ones who obeyed me. Perhaps your kind is not like mine after all. The chamber grew quiet, the rumbling fading. The carvings on the walls stilled, their light gone, leaving only faint marks of history. The crew let out the breath they had all been holding. Rahul stepped to Myra's side, his hand on her shoulder. You chose well. You gave her no chains, but no crown either. You gave humanity time. Bran still looked troubled, his eyes on the dim coffin. And what if time makes us weaker? What if enemies come while her power sleeps? Myra met his gaze, her voice steady. Then we fight with our own hands. If we cannot survive without someone else's fire, then we were never meant to survive at all. The crew stood in silence, her words sinking deep. They knew the danger was not gone, only delayed. But they also knew the choice was made. As they left the chamber, the sand above shifted, sealing the path behind them. The desert swallowed the entrance once more, hiding the queen's resting place. When they reached the surface, the stars were already burning in the night sky. Myra looked up at them, feeling their light on her face. She thought of the queen, her sorrow, her fire, her story. The queen was not free, but she was not forgotten. And Myra carried both the warning and the hope within her heart. She knew the hardest part was yet to come. Telling the world would not be easy. Some would demand the queen's release, others would demand silence. Humanity would argue, fight, and divide. But that was the true test. The choice was not only hers. It belonged to them all. And so the crew set their course back home, carrying with them a story that would shake the stars. The ship broke through Earth's atmosphere, its engines glowing faintly as it descended. Myra stood at the observation window, her eyes fixed on the blue planet below. The desert chamber was far behind, but its memory burned in her mind like fire. She carried not only her choice but the weight of a story older than nations, older than her people's rise among the stars. Her crew was silent as they landed. Each of them had seen the queen, heard her words, and felt her power. None of them could forget. When the hatch opened, officials and scientists were waiting. They expected treasures, relics, and perhaps even weapons. What Myra brought them was different. She carried records, carvings copied into memory banks, and her own voice ready to speak of what she had seen. In the first meeting, leaders demanded answers. Did you find power? Did you bring back knowledge to advance us? Or is this another empty ruin? One asked sharply. Myra placed the recordings on the table. The room filled with light as the carvings appeared, showing the queen's rise, her empire, her sorrow, and her trial. The officials stared in silence. Some leaned forward in awe, others leaned back in fear. This is no empty ruin, Myra said. It is a warning and a gift. A queen who ruled the stars still lives, waiting in her coffin beneath the sand. She offered greatness if I freed her, but I chose restraint. She sleeps still. Her story is ours now. A long silence followed her words. Then arguments began. One leader struck the table. You should have released her. Humanity could rise higher than ever before with her at our side. Do you know how many wars, how much suffering, could be ended? Another shook their head. Or we could have fallen into her chains. She built empires on ashes. Do you wish Earth to be the next to burn? Voices clashed, some calling Myra wise, others calling her a fool. She stood calm in the storm, though her heart raced. She knew this would happen. She had seen it in her mind on the journey home. When the meeting ended, the world already knew. News spread fast, faster than she expected. Images of the queen's carvings appeared across every channel. People argued on every street, in every hall, in every home. Some feared her, some longed for her, and some simply wondered if she was real at all. Myra stayed quiet at first, letting the voices rise. But she knew silence would not last. So she began to speak, not as a ruler, not as a commander, but as a witness. She stood before crowds and said, "The queen is not a myth. I saw her, I heard her voice. She was powerful, yes, but she was also dangerous. I chose not to free her because trust is not given with words alone. It must be earned. She sleeps, but she is not forgotten. Her story belongs to us all, and with it, we must decide who we want to be. Her words spread further, reaching not only leaders but ordinary people. Farmers in fields, workers in factories, children in schools all listened. Some felt hope, others fear, but all felt the weight of the choice. Months passed. Scholars studied the carvings, learning from the Queen's history. Engineers searched for patterns in her designs, hoping to adapt them without awakening her. Philosophers argued about her meaning, writing books and teaching lessons about power, pride, and fall. Myra watched all this unfold with quiet patience. She had not freed the Queen, but in a way, the Queen was already free. Not in body, but in memory. She lived in every story told, every lesson learned. Yet not all were content. A secret faction formed, whispering in shadows. They called themselves the Crown Seekers. They believed humanity was weak without the Queen. To them, Myra was not a hero but a thief who had denied them greatness. One night, Rahul came to Myra's quarters with grim news. They plan to return to the chamber. They think they can break the seals without you. Myra's chest tightened. She had known this was possible, but hearing it confirmed chilled her. If they reach her, if they wake her without care, the world may not be ready. Rahul nodded. Then we must be ready first. So Myra gathered her crew once more. They had been through the chamber together, and they understood what was at stake. Quietly, without fanfare, they prepared to return. Not to free the Queen, not to seal her deeper, but to guard her rest until humanity was truly ready. The journey back across the desert felt heavier than before. The wind whispered across the dunes, carrying echoes of the past. When they reached the hidden place, they found signs that others had already tried to enter. The sand was disturbed, tools abandoned, but the chamber remained sealed. Myra placed her hand on the stone. She felt the faint hum within, the steady heartbeat of the Queen's presence. She whispered softly, "You are still waiting." Rahul stood beside her. "Do you think they will ever free her?" Myra looked out at the endless stars above. "Maybe one day. Maybe when humanity has grown wise enough to see power as burden, not prize. Until then, she remains as she is. Not ruler, not prisoner, but lesson." They left the chamber as they had before, letting the desert cover its secrets once more. Back on Earth, life moved forward. The Queen's story continued to shape hearts and minds. Some feared her, some dreamed of her, but all remembered her. And Myra's choice became a lesson passed from one generation to the next. Years later, when children learned history, they did not only learn of wars and nations. They also learned of the Queen beneath the sand, and the human who chose patience over power. Teachers asked their students, "Would you have freed her? Or would you have waited?" And every child gave their own answer, building a future on questions, not chains. Myra grew older, but she never forgot the golden eyes that had watched her in the chamber. She knew the Queen waited still, a shadow beneath the sands, a flame that could rise again. But she also knew that humanity was no longer the same as before. They had been given a choice, and choices were seeds. One day, perhaps, those seeds would bloom into wisdom. And when that day came, the Queen's burial chamber would not be a prison. It would be a mirror, showing humanity who they had become. Until then, she rested, not forgotten.